Hey, what's up everybody? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today I'm going to talk about the new Sennheiser HD 550, and you are not experiencing deja vu because the 505 came out recently, and I will be comparing it to that model later. What is similar though is this is still the 5 Series chassis, and a lot of the improvements that came with the HD 505 is still present with the 550. So what makes the 550 different? Well, for one, the price is a little bit higher. The HD 505 was selling in the US for $269.99, and this guy sells for $299 US. So there's a bit of a price bump, and now we're getting closer to the HD 600 series, like the 600, the HD 650, and of course the HD 6XX, which is only $199 in the US typically. So again, I will be making comparison to those as well as the HD 490 Pro later in this review. Now the HD 550 comes with a couple things. One is of course this little travel bag, which is identical to the same travel bag that you get in the HD 505, as well as the same cord that's found in pretty much the entire 5 Series chassis lineup right now. You have a single 2.5 inch or 2.5 millimeter multi-pole connection on the side. It plugs into the left side of the headphone here and locks in just like the HD 505 and 560S before it. And newer versions of the 560S and all versions of the HD 505 have a 1/4 inch adapter that screws on, exposing a 3.5 millimeter on the inside. You also get a better box with the HD 550 because the 505 has a brown box. That's, I guess, where some of the savings went, but the rest of it does go into a slight sound quality difference. Now, the 505 had that copper color, which I actually liked because when you have a lot of headphones, anything that has a splash of color or a different design is kind of like a breath of fresh air. This is a more traditional approach with the 550, which I think will please more people in general who like the monochromatic look and maybe they want just a little splash of silver, whereas the 560S was all black. Now, one of my favorite improvements that the 550 has and the 505 over the 560 is the reduced clamp force. They're within literally a few grams measured of each other with the rig that I made, which is excellent. It's a pretty massive reduction in clamp force, and because this is lightweight and the ear cups are rather large, this is a very comfortable headphone to wear, especially for long periods of time. The pads are quite breathable as well, and it's an open back, so you don't have that like plunger effect or anything. So this is a really good endurance headphone as far as comfort goes. The 560S was pretty comfortable. He had mixed reviews from people, or mixed, I guess, feedback, partly because ergonomically it wasn't bad. These can, rotate and pivot and all that stuff, but it squeezed your head quite firmly. And that was an issue for me because the way those squeezed on my head created too much pressure back here, and I didn't like that for long-term listening. That was my only real criticism I had of the 560S in terms of like overall performance for value and all that. Well, because this is greatly reduced, but it has all the other things, it still rotates and pivots up and down. You still get a telescoping yoke. I think this is great, and I can wear this for a much longer period of time. Now, this still has that leatherette padded headband that wraps all the way around. Some people will like the older 560S, design as far as having this removable piece. I was told, I haven't tried this, but if you remove these screws right here, right above on the inside of the knuckle, this is a user serviceable headband to replace it. Obviously with leatherette, the wear rate on that is going to vary greatly by climate and your body composition and all that, but I did want to call that out. From a comfort standpoint though, because this is light and the clamp force is reduced, it's great. And then from an ear pad standpoint, these are the exact same ear pads on all 3 models. They haven't changed it, which means you get just about 70 millimeters of height, just over 40 millimeters of width, and slight variance on the depth. The front side is, over 20 millimeters. Technically, it goes up to about 30 millimeters of depth on the back side, but because of that little bump, you may not get that same level of clearance. This will bring it down to about 25. So depending on your ear shape, you might just barely kiss the back of that. That hasn't changed, but I did want to call that out. Now, another thing that's different, this is going to be very easy to illustrate. So here's the 560S driver baffle, and you can see that silk screen that's over the front there. The HD 505, and then the brand new HD 550. Now, me trying to do 2 of these at once is going to be a challenge, but this is a change. They made several changes. They have the different screen that you just saw, but there's actually a different impedance. They changed the diaphragm material slightly, and all of this was in pursuit of a better sound quality, or at least what they were trying to target. And when I say better with air quotes, that's just because it's tuned to sound differently. That doesn't mean you will like it more than the 505 or even the 560S, because people have different preferences. The 560S is the most exciting sounding of the 3. The bass is rather punchy, and it comes across a little bit more forward and bright. Borderline harsh, but it's a very snappy very mid-forward presentation. So if you want vocals to have really sharp bite to it, the 560S is still great for that. Overall, it's a good performer, and it had more bass extension than the Sennheiser 6XO line, like the 650 and the 600. But to me, the sacrifice was a little bit more harsh to listen to. Not as resolving, but it does have deeper bass. So if you're chasing that, that was a good value pick. The 505 was great because it tamed the 560 sound just a little. It kind of preserved what a lot of people liked about the 560, but it was much more comfortable to wear. So to me, this was a better presentation. And then you get to the 550, which is the best version of everything because this is the headphone that blurs the line between the 500 series headphones and the legendary 600 series. Which, if you look at the frequency response, which takes my opinion out of it, this is what my rig measures it as, and I use a KB006X pinna clone with a IEC711 coupler clone. That's only important if you want to compare it to other measurements, but I ideally try to use my site to compare measurements against other headphones I've measured. You don't want to compare it to someone else's rig because, one, their testing methodology could be different, but every ear simulator measures things differently, so you can't compare this directly to a Gross or BK5128, etc. Although it is nice to see how each rig measures the same headphones so you can see what the variance of your ear shape can do as far as affecting sound quality. So as far as how my rig measures it, you can see a really nice linear bass response. It rolls off a little bit, which is very common on a dynamic open back headphone. Usually closed backs give you more sub bass if that's what you're chasing. Really, really flat, clean mid-range presentation, and it doesn't lift too strong in any particular area. There's a little bit of a recess in the pinner range, like the 4 to 5K, but not by much. The little peak that you see at 8K is really minor. It's not, I don't even hear that peak really. This is just an artifact from the way my rig is hearing it. And the other thing I want to point out is the driver matching in particular of the HD550 is excellent. Now, if you compare it to the 505, which I'm going to try to, yeah, that's a bright enough color. They are very similar headphones. The difference is the 550 has a more tame 2 to 3K presentation, both on the rig and what I hear. So if you purchased the 505, maybe you found it a little bit shouty still, even over the 560, which if you compare it to the 560, it comes across even brighter because there's less of a recess here in the pinna gain area. So it's not as relaxed sounding. I think the 50 or the 550, the newest iteration, is much more in line with my personal preference because frankly, you can listen to anything on it and these measurements kind of back that up. Now, I wanted to show you the HD490 Pro real quick, which is the blue line, and it has, this is when I switched it to the mixing pads, by the way. The producing pads have more bass and more relaxed mid-range presentation, but you can start to see more and more similarities. This is more in line with like a traditional Sennheiser sound, but again, I actually like the 550, both measured and my subjective listening tag, more than the 490 Pro, regardless of what pad you have, as far as being a jack of all trades, which doesn't mean it's perfect, but that leads me to a few important comparisons I have to make in terms of sound quality on the subjective side. And I want to call out one very key thing here is I wish Sennheiser released the HD550 at the same exact time as the 505 because there's a lot of stuff that's so close to each other. Some people may have already purchased the 505, rightly so, because it was a great release. And now it's kind of like, well, is this one a little bit better for just a little bit more? And those people lost the opportunity to make that decision for themselves of which flavor was going to be better for them. Because to me, the 505 was great because it was a lot of improvements over the 560, mainly in terms of chassis design. I think even though they look similar, the comfort improvements on the 505 alone was worth it. And it was tuned slightly better for me. It doesn't sound as bright or fatiguing. It was easier to listen to. Then you had the 550, which is only $30 more than the 505, and one, the colorway alone might sway people because they want the silver and black, but the mid-range presentation is pretty damn near perfect. It's the best presented mid-range I've heard on a headphone. I can't even recall how long it's been since I've covered a new headphone launch that is more in line with how I like mid-range to sound. The Sennheiser 6XX has always been my favorite headphone for mid-range timbre, but it sounds a little bit more compressed. Resolution is great. The bass quality is excellent still on the 650, 600, and HD6XX if you can get one in the US. But this is in an interesting spot because it's a little bit less money than the typical selling price of the HD600 and 650, and the mid-range is freaking fantastic. Then you have a little bit more bass extension to go with it, It's seriously one of the best headphones I've heard for the money. Just to be blunt, it's a stellar launch, and I wish that they launched it in line with the 505, because not to take away from this, I think some people may like it more. Now, with that being said, from a potential of what you can get out of these, especially when you start considering EQ, you can easily make the 505 sound very similar to the 550 with minor EQ, like a little bit of a reduction in that 2 to 3K, and you're really, really close. I mentioned that they did some driver material changes, like the impedance and the membrane change. It's close, but the EQ alone is going to get you like 99% there as far as I'm concerned. So don't necessarily feel like you were missing out too much. I just think it should have been more up to the consumer if they had two options to pick right off the bat. Now, the bass delivery of this guy, I already mentioned that the 6XO lineup in general, which is that 600 lineup from Sennheiser, I think the bass detail is still just slightly better with those. It's minor, but you get a little bit more resolution in the bass, I guess. You can hear more of the nuances in the bass. This is extremely close. This is the closest it's been that I've heard. But the advantage of this guy is it has more sub-bass extension. Now, when you look at the frequency response, you don't see a lot of emphasis in the bass. However, the way this bass is delivered and how good the bass quality is, it actually sounds like it has more bass than some other headphones that show a higher emphasis on frequency response. Bass dynamics and bass quality do make a difference on your perceived level of bass. And even though this sounds, or I guess looks neutral on the charts, the bass presentation is excellent. I absolutely love the way this sounds for bass. Obviously, if you're chasing that thunderous deep bass, maybe consider the HD 620. Or a headphone that's known for more of that bass, like the Sony MDR M1, for example. That one has awesome bass in the closed back, in the open back too, but I don't like the treble and upper mid-range presentation on Sony's open back. I like this one quite a bit more. The entire sound presentation, of course, isn't just bass and mid-range. Treble is going to be important as well, and this is where I think Sennheiser will have different flavors for different people. This sounds closer to the 6XO lineup as a whole than it does the adjacent Sennheiser 500 series products. I don't mind the upper treble extension. I think it's relaxed enough. It sounds not as wide as something like the 560S. So if you're chasing like super wide soundstage, this sounds a little bit more closed, but that's the same reason. I guess this is from the same byproduct of having the mid-range tuning that it does. So to me, what makes this cool is it's that really happy medium of excellent tonality with a little bit more sub bass and a little bit more zing on the upper treble. I used it for so many different genres, again, without doing EQ, and I didn't find I ever needed to do EQ. I guess sometimes you could add a little bass to it, but EDM music, acoustics, watching movies on it, it really is a solid headphone for everything, and that's the strongest case I can make. It's just one of those headphones where if you don't know what you want, this is a great starting point, and because it's available internationally, I think that's a really good release. As far as gaming performance goes, a lot of what I liked about this from the music side greatly carries into gaming, and another bold claim is coming, so buckle up. The 550 is my favorite Sennheiser headphone for gaming, followed, or I guess adjacent to the HD800S, which with EQ is pretty much still one of the best you can get. But without EQ, just plugging it in, I actually like the 550 more, simply because it's very easy to pinpoint audio cues. I do a mix of gaming, I do immersive gaming, single player stuff, but I also do a lot of competitive FPS. And balancing both, being immersive and enjoying mixed content while also being able to pinpoint important audio cues, have it be comfortable, all of these things factor in. And that's the magic with the 550 or even the 505 with a little bit of EQ, again, even over the 6XO lineup. So the Sennheiser 6XO lineup in terms of mid-range is great in tonality, but because the bass roll-off is a little bit more and it doesn't have the same soundstage presentation, everything sounds more centered. And it's still fine for gaming, but a lot of people liked even the 560S over that. Well, the 550 kind of ties in that happy marriage of both. I have more soundstage than the 6XO lineup, less than the 560, but it's not as punishing to listen to either. So it's just one of those things where it's super easy for me to understand where stuff is coming from. Explosions, gunshots, stuff that's happening on even immersive games like crashing waves into a boat, stuff that can just randomly be a lot louder than what your ambient sound is. That's where the 550 has that really nice marriage from lows to highs that doesn't punish you in any particular area, allowing you to stay very immersed and even listen to it at a slightly louder volume, which is nice. The 490 Pro is a very close runner-up for me, and it's kind of been the top pick or one of the better picks under 500 for gaming, just because you have two pads, and if you do the producing pad, that gives you more bass, really fun for immersive gaming. And on the competitive side, I like the mixing pads. However, the overall presentation to me is the best. If I could only pick one, I would do the 550 for everything. So, you know, what you're getting with the 490 Pro is more the chassis upgrades in my opinion. And then I already talked about the 6XL lineup. I didn't particularly talk about the Aoun or OWN AR5000 to my left over there, but that headphone is, the pads are really comfortable. It's a nice big headphone. It's a little bit heavier than these. There's noticeably more weight. Still very comfortable to wear thanks to the suspension strap. That one has more of a presentation like the 490 Pro in terms of like the bass warmth, but the treble, or upper mids and treble, is not as good as the 550. Not only in terms of tonality, but I think this needs even less EQ if you're really trying to maximize it for gaming too. The Aoun AR5000, one of the best advantages to it is the chassis design, and it has dual 3.5mm inputs, which I love, so you can use something like the Meze boom mic and use that for a chat communicator if you don't want to deal with the Antlion mod mic. Now this supports Antlion mod mic just fine. I actually put one on the 560S, so if you want to turn this into a gaming headset, you very well can. And now you have like a really high-end gaming setup for not spending a ton of money when you consider the sonic performance of it. Now I know a lot of people are going to ask me about how this compares to many other headphones, and as you can tell, this video is long as it is, and I can only fit so many in one video, so I'm going to very quickly highlight a couple. Compared to HiFiMan, I like this a bit more than the HiFiMan Sundara. The Sundara is, I guess, a worthy pick if you're willing to do EQ and you're chasing more of the resolution and speed. They sound really clear, but I don't think they have the same dynamic punch or mid-range balance that the 550 has overall. So I would still give an edge to the 550. The Edition XS always goes on sale, and you can get it for less than this now, which is crazy. That one has more overhead in terms of EQ ability. If you're really craving a lot of sub bass, but you still want to open back, and you want really high clarity and resolution, part of that is because it's very bright in comparison to this, but it's a very clear, very resolving headphone. It's just a matter of what you're trying to chase. Personally, I like the mid-range and the overall tonality of the 550 more. I just think it's more versatile. And with the Odyssey MM100, which is another thing to consider, the MM100 is nice, and I think what happens is too relaxed in the 5 to 6K area. I think it's right about 5 kilohertz. So it actually sounds less detailed than this. And then there's a weird like timbre shift that happens from 1 to 3K because the emphasis kind of, you know, wobbles back and forth a little bit as you go up the frequency response. It's great with EQ, and that planar has awesome bass if you EQ it. But without EQ, again, the Sennheiser just sounds a little bit more natural. So those are worthy ones to consider. I know there's headphones from Biodynamic and others out there, and I'll do my best to answer questions in the comments below because there's just so many models to cover. And frankly, I don't want this video to be an hour long. So with that being said, this was sent to me for review by Sennheiser. I should have said that in the beginning if I didn't. But if not, I don't do any affiliate special kickback things with Sennheiser. I turn down pretty much all affiliate campaigns with every brand. It's kind of just the way I want to operate. So I don't have any special links in the description below. I get no kickbacks. I have no monetary exchange with Sennheiser, and they have no idea what I'm going to say about the headphone prior to releasing this. Biggest takeaway is if you just want one headphone at this price range that doesn't require EQ and you want to plug it in your console, plug it into your PC, a DAP on the go, etc., this is one of the best values in audio right now. The only thing I wish Sennheiser did was release it at the same time at the 505, because I think some people are going to be a little irked out that there's already another 500 series headphone that came out in such a short period of time. They're all great in their own way, and hopefully after watching this you kind of understand how these all stack up to each other. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching the review. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already so I can see you at the next one. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.